Hello, my name is Jeremy Murray, and this is my individual teaching topic on nonverbal communication. There are two basic forms of communication, verbal and nonverbal. Verbal communication is everything that you say from one individual to another. It's what you could put down on a sheet of paper, almost a transcript of what two individuals are communicating to each other. It could be the exact printed word. The other form of communication is nonverbal communications. There's 5 main categories of nonverbal communication, but there's several subcategories. The 5 main categories are body language, also called kinesics, distance or proxemics, the physical environment, voice, and touch, also called haptics. Body language is probably the broadest category, and it involves everything you're doing with your body. It involves facial expressions, the way you smile, the way you frown, the way you lift an eyebrow, the way you don't lift an eyebrow. It involves things such as hand gestures. How are you speaking with your hands? Are you using one or the other? Are you using them both? It involves the way you fold your hand. You might fold your hands, the way you fold your arms. Do you cross them? Do you sit in a more upright posture, a more closed down posture? And there's a lot of subcategories to each part of that, to that overall concept of body language. Distance or proxemics is really the distance from two people when they're communicating. And there's a lot of different kind of circles to be considered with this. In fact, there's at least 8 different that have been described. Essentially, there is a close circle and a far circle that is all in each of one of 4 categories. It can be an intimate circle is a given distance if you are close and if you're far away. A personal distance, there's a close and a far away distance to that. A professional, close and far distance away from that. And then there's like a public speaking environment. There's also close and far distance. And I don't really want to go into each number of those distances because it's really kind of outside of the scope of this. But anyways, the physical environment is what environment are you in? It's the environment of the pictures on the wall, the chairs in the room, how are they arranged, how is a desk set up, where do you sit in the room in relation to the other people in the room. You know, the physical environment, is it hot, is it cold, things like that. When you talk about voice, we're not talking about the actual transcript, and we're not talking about the actual words that are being used. When we're talking about voice, what we're talking about is the tone you're using, the emphasis you use on given words. That's really what we mean by voice being a nonverbal form of communication. And then there's haptics, or the touch, and touch involves the way two people interact, and how touch is kind of related to that. You know, is it a handshake? And there's actually a lot of studies on how to give a good handshake. And also in sports, it's a high five. You know, sometimes it's in football, people give each other a butt slap, and that's a really acceptable form of nonverbal communication in professional sports. The 6 basic human emotions can also be portrayed, or can also be communicated using nonverbal communication. Happiness, anger, sadness, envy, fear, and love can all be conveyed nonverbally. So why is nonverbal communication important? There's several things that are being relayed to the other person you're talking to in the form of nonverbal communication. For one thing, it really will display whether you care what the other individual is talking about. That has to do with how are you paying attention to them. You know, are you making eye contact with them? Are you responding in appropriate ways? It also lets them know whether you're being truthful or not. If you're sweating, if you're closed down, if you're doing a shifty eye glare, things like that. These are all things that portray truthfulness to another individual. Finally, are you listening to them? If your gaze is elsewhere, if your body language is clearly showing that you're attempting to leave for a meeting you're late for, or you're trying to run away while they're trying to catch you, they'll definitely get the perception that you're not listening to it. And that goes back to something that we talked about in class already early in the semester. Is about perception being reality. And sometimes people say that nonverbal communication is all the ways that we build rapport with another individual. And if that's the truth, if that's how you're building rapport with another individual, but you're doing it in such a way where they don't think you care, they don't think you're being truthful, or they don't think you're listening to them, then what is the reality of the perception of what they're seeing from that? Are they seeing you as somebody who is paying attention and somebody who is to be trusted and somebody who they can do business with? Or are they seeing you as somebody who is assertive and somebody who's professional and somebody who is using their nonverbal communication properly? The following slide has a clip of a TED Talk given by an individual named Mark Bowden, who is an expert on body language. According to Mark, when you meet a new person, you subconsciously put them into one of four categories. You either categorize an individual as a friend, a predator, a potential partner, or you judge them with complete indifference and you dismiss them. Using body language effectively can help with getting a message across, particularly if you want to avoid being categorized as indifferent to another. I found this clip to be very interesting, and I debated on whether I wanted to talk about the clip first or whether I wanted to show the clip first. And ultimately, I decided I want to talk about it first, so that you have a chance to notice some of the things that I did about it. And what you're going to see is you're going to see Mark being very genuine and being very open and forthcoming with his audience, and he smiles a lot and he takes his time, and he does a really good job of engaging and drawing the audience in. He's really trying to get the audience out of the indifferent category and into the friend category. The thing is about this, and you'll notice this later on, is that he says that this is actually an inauthentic behavior, not an authentic behavior.
So, if I come, now here's the important bit, because if I come on and I don't trigger friend or enemy or potential sexual partner with you, which for those I've triggered that, you might want to start an orderly queue, just around there. Sometimes it goes around the whole block, but that's okay. If I haven't triggered those, here's the important thing for us here today. You are now indifferent to me. And here's what you're hearing. And your mind is off imagining the potential enemies or friends or sexual partners. Now, there are 7 billion people on the planet right now. What do you think is the default category for anybody new that you meet on this earth? Indifferent. Absolutely. You are pre-programmed to be indifferent to the 7 billion people on this planet right now. And here's my problem. I don't know many of you out here today. I mean, the majority. There's Tracy and Jennifer over there, and that's always good, yeah. But the rest of you, they're my friends and family, but the rest of you, I don't know. You don't know me, which means you're designed to be indifferent to me right now, and I have a really important message for you today. But evolutionary psychology says, and behavioral psychology says that you're just not going to pay attention to me unless I can get in the category of friend with you. And so that's what I've been doing. All the time I've been on here so far, I've been giving you the signals to your primitive brain that will trigger you to cause me to go into friend category with you and cherry pick from all the language that I've given you, only the stuff that is good. And if you couldn't find anything good, you've been making it up in your head.
Now, this is a second clip from the exact same TED Talk given by Mark Bowden. And what you're going to notice here is that he reverses it here. And what he does is he goes from what I was saying before he considers to be inauthentic behavior, where he's behaving in such a way that he wants to manipulate you in a given way, in his case, so that he can put you into the friend, or you will put him into the friend category and not be indifferent to him. In this case, what he's trying to do is he's trying to manipulate you by putting him into the predator category. And you really see his body language change here, and his tone in particular. I mean, his message is a little bit different, but also at the same time, it's the tone of the message that you'll pick up on right away. The other thing I want you to notice is about the last 5 seconds of the video, where he comes back around and he gives you a smile. And the thing is you can almost feel it in yourself when you go from seeing the first clip where you're already thinking, boy, Mark's a good guy, and then you see the second clip and you start thinking, wait a second, maybe I had Mark wrong. And by the very end, he just gives you that smile and it draws you right back in, and you're right back where he had you to begin with.
If I was being truly authentic with you, I would not show up for this. And I'm not joking. That's a reality. I wake up, I do this professionally, by the way. So I've already done one of these this morning for an hour and a half over in Niagara. They put me on after Chris Hadfield. He's a Canadian spaceman national hero. Thanks for your programming. I wake up in the morning and I go, the last thing I want to do at an instinctual gut level is to stand in front of a bunch of people who I don't know, who I have no data around because I can't see them, and put out there my life's work in front of them for them to criticize if they want to. That's not what I want to do. And when I start to get that feeling, and if you really want to see the authentic me, the real me, because build it and they will come, when I start to get the feeling that you don't respect the has anybody here written 3 books on body language and behavior? I'll just answer for you. No. So that you should judge me at all is stupidity on your part. This is the authentic me. This is what I really feel. And here's the reality. You're safe here because you've got this stuff in front of you. But if I came up close and showed you the real signals of predator, which are the real signals I want to display in front of this kind of large crowd, I guarantee you don't like me so much now, do you? So, this stuff works so well.
The next clip I want to show is from another TED Talk that was given by an individual named Amy Cuddy. And I don't want to give you as much background on this, but I will give you a little bit of insight just so you know where you're coming in. And basically what she's talking about, and she does discuss this a little bit, but she's talking about power dynamics and how they are influenced by body language. At this time in the talk, she's talking about it in context of body language between 2 individuals, and then at the end of it, she starts talking about how body language can be interpreted in an individual context, particularly in MBA students.
We are also influenced by our nonverbals, our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology. So what nonverbals am I talking about? I'm a social psychologist, I study prejudice, and I teach at a competitive business school. So it was inevitable that I would become interested in power dynamics. I became especially interested in nonverbal expressions of power and dominance. And what are nonverbal expressions of power and dominance? Well, this is what they are. So in the animal kingdom, they are about expanding. So you make yourself big, you stretch out, you take up space, you're basically opening up. It's about opening up. And this is true across the animal kingdom. It's not just limited to primates. And humans do the same thing. So they do this both when they have power sort of chronically, and also when they're feeling powerful in the moment. And this one is especially interesting because it really shows us how universal and old these expressions of power are. This expression, which is known as pride, Jessica Tracy has studied, she shows that people who are born with sight and people who are congenitally blind do this when they win at a physical competition. So when they cross the finish line and they've won, it doesn't matter if they've never seen anyone do it, they do this. So the arms up in the V, the chin is slightly lifted. What do we do when we feel powerless? We do exactly the opposite. We close up, we wrap ourselves up, we make ourselves small. We don't want to bump into the person next to us. So again, both animals and humans do the same thing. And this is what happens when you put together high and low power. So what we tend to do when it comes to power is that we complement the other's nonverbals. So if someone's being really powerful with us, we tend to make ourselves smaller. We don't mirror them, we do the opposite of them. So I'm watching this behavior in the classroom, and what do I notice? I notice that MBA students really exhibit the full range of power nonverbals. So you have people who are like caricatures of alphas, like really coming into the room. They get right into the middle of the room before class even starts, like they really want to occupy space. When they sit down, they're sort of spread out. They raise their hands like this. You have other people who are virtually collapsing when they come in. As soon as they come in, you see it. You see it on their faces and their bodies, and they sit in their chair and they make themselves tiny, and they go like this when they raise their hand.
In the next slide, I have another section of the TED Talk from Amy Cuddy. And I've really kind of cut down what she had here because in the long run, I was just afraid it was going to run too long. But what I've left here, or what I've cut out, is a study that she did with a group of individuals, specifically MBA students. And what they did was they took the students and they had them stand in either a low power pose or a high power pose for 2 minutes prior to an interview and then a stressful situation. And the clip I have here really only shows the high power poses and the low power poses. And the end result of this is what they found was that if you took these individuals and they literally stood there in a high power pose or literally sat there in a low power pose for 2 minutes, a simple 2 minutes, that the perception of how the interview went and the ability for them to have a positive experience and be put into a hireable situation was dramatically improved. I don't want to go all the way into the science of it. There's really a nice talk if you watch this whole thing. She talks about how cortisol levels are lowered, how testosterone levels are elevated, and how those things positively put you into a mindset to be able to accomplish what would otherwise be a very stressful situation. The thing that's the take-home message about this is that really the only difference that was part of the study was this 2 minutes either power posing or low power posing, and the positive effects that it had by trying to use body language to put yourself into a positive, powerful mindset.
What happens if you do that at a really minimal level, like this tiny manipulation, this tiny intervention? For 2 minutes you say, I want you to stand like this, and it's going to make you feel more powerful. So this is what we did. We decided to bring people into the lab and run a little experiment. And these people adopted for 2 minutes either high power poses or low power poses. And I'm just going to show you 5 of the poses, although they took on only 2. So here's one, couple more. This one has been dubbed the Wonder Woman by the media. Here are a couple more. So you can be standing or you can be sitting. And here are the low power poses. So you're folding up, you're making yourself small. This one is very low power. When you're touching your neck, you're really kind of protecting yourself.
So according to Amy Cuddy, you should try power posing for 2 minutes before a stressful activity. But what else can you do to use nonverbal communication to your advantage? According to Forbes magazine, there are 10 ways that you can use body language effectively to your advantage in a business setting. Number 1 is making good eye contact. The rule of thumb with eye contact is 3 seconds at a time. If you're doing less than 3 seconds, sometimes you give off the impression that you're a bit shifty-eyed, that you're being nervous, that you're not communicating effectively. If you're longer than 3 seconds giving good eye contact, what happens is you end up giving the look that you're glaring, or sometimes that you're getting too intrusive with the individual. Number 2 is a confident handshake. And there's a real technique to giving a confident handshake. But the bottom line with it, palm-to-palm contact, give a good squeeze, don't crush somebody's hand, and don't give them the limp dead fish. Number 3 are effective gestures. And what they mean by effective gestures is using your hands effectively in communication. It does enhance your communication to use your hands. It doesn't help to have yourself in a closed down position, hands stuffed into your pockets, hands tucked away behind you. You know, you want to use your hands to your advantage as part of your nonverbal communication. Number 4 is dressing the part. This is something that I've taken a lot of pride in over the course of my career, where I always felt that I was trying to dress for the position that I wanted, not for the position that I had. And I have to be honest with you, particularly when I started my career, I was only 23 years old, and the perception was that I was so young, I wouldn't know the job well enough to actually perform the job, particularly when I was working with older patients. I don't have that much of a problem with it anymore. But at the same time, I'm still relatively young. I'm only 39. Dressing the part has really played a positive role in my ability to be promoted and my ability to have effective nonverbal communication. Number 5 is authoritative posture and presence. I'm not going to beat this one like a dead horse, but this is really what Amy Cuddy was talking about when she was talking about the power poses and the high power versus the low power poses. Use authoritative posture, use good posture, use high power poses to your advantage. Number 6 is using appropriate facial expressions. What do I mean by this? I mean a good smile. I mean a good eye contact. I guess I already covered that. I mean a good smile, to be honest with you. Number 7, initiating interactions. And what I mean by that is, by don't waiting for these things to come to you. You initiate the handshake. You initiate the conversation. You seek out other individuals. Don't wait for them to come. Don't be the person in the back of the room that isn't interacting with others, particularly in social situations. Number 8 is appropriate tone of voice. In the clip with Mark Bowden, you really could see how his tone of voice really changed the perception of what he was saying. And it really changed your overall opinion of him as a person in a very short time, too. Number 9, give your full attention. By full attention, I mean really listen to what people are saying. Pay attention to them. Cue into them. See what they're about. See what they're trying to communicate. Pay attention to their nonverbal cues, which is number 10, responding to them. You do want to pay attention to their nonverbal cues. You do also want to respond to them. You don't want to get into a position where you're mimicking their nonverbal communication. So be careful to respond to it appropriately, but don't look like you're mocking them, and don't just look like you're mimicking their exact movements. I'd like to cover a few words of caution or a few things for you to be aware of as you move forward in your career and as you interpret and use nonverbal communication. First, misinterpretation of nonverbal communication, particularly when dealing with highly political organizations, can have extremely bad consequences. Making the wrong conclusion, jumping to a conclusion, without further information can seriously damage an individual's integrity, acceptance, or success in business. Second, please be aware of context as you interpret nonverbal communication. If you're having a meeting in your office, one in which you might be leading, and there's an individual in the back that's sitting there with their arms crossed, you may interpret that as an aggressive posture, someone who's reluctant to help, or someone who's in disagreement with what you're saying. But it's also entirely possible that that individual is tired, shy, or simply sick. So please keep that in mind as you interpret another individual's nonverbal communication. Finally, unless you're Mark Bowden and you're giving a TED Talk in which you're intentionally manipulating the audience to display the power of nonverbal communication, bluffing should absolutely be avoided. In the following clip, I'm going to show a clip of a baseball player named Rafael Palmeiro, who almost single-handedly blames his bluffing using nonverbal communication as the reason his Hall of Fame career was derailed and ultimately why he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rafael Palmeiro, and I am a professional baseball player. I'll be brief in my remarks today. Let me start by telling you this. I have never used steroids, period. I do not know how to say it any more clearly than that. Never. The reference to me in Mr. Canseco's book is absolutely false.
Although Rafael Palmeiro looked like he knew what he was saying, He was trying to bluff Congress and ultimately is still out of the Hall of Fame. So for conclusion, I'd like to add just a few words of wisdom. First off, don't try to bluff someone. It always works out badly. Second, be aware that you're not the only person sending and receiving nonverbal communications. Third, be careful of your interpretation, remembering the context. And finally, be yourself. Be authentic, do a good job, be good to people, and you'll do just fine. Thank you.